Welcome to episode 7 of Bigger Than You Know, the series where in each installment I feature a company that's likely much bigger than you thought it was. This time, my focus is on Procter Gamble, which is actually my inspiration for starting the series and could very well be the company that fits it best. Does that even sound familiar when I say Procter Gamble? I mean, have you ever heard of this company before? My guess is a lot of people haven't, or if you have, you don't know much about it, which is strange because their products are sold all over the supermarket. The reason we don't know the name is because they don't really feature it. Well, sure, if you're looking closely at the back of the label, you'll see it, but otherwise you won't. Procter & Gamble was a pioneer of this brand management technique, essentially marketing separate brands owned by the same company as if they were separate businesses. It's a technique that they started and is used all over today. We've seen it throughout this series. Though it's not necessarily the goal of it, an effect of this type of marketing is that no one realizes just how big they are. So that's my mission today. The sole purpose of this video is to help you realize the magnitude of Procter & Gamble and prove to you that they are in fact bigger than you know. Looking at the Fortune 500 list, they're number 42, meaning they're the 42nd largest company in the US in terms of revenue, which was over $66 billion, which we can all agree that's very large, but they've actually been slipping a little. Traditionally, they've had higher spots on the list, and that's because their sales have gone down in recent years. They've lost some market share and have been criticized for lacking innovation. Maybe we can talk more about all of that in the future, but let's not get too distracted by it right now. Their value on the stock market is approaching $210 billion. Just to give you an idea of what they do and how they position themselves in the market, I pulled a couple graphics from their most recent annual report. This one is their sales by segment. It shows they deal in beauty, grooming, healthcare, fabric and home care, along with baby, feminine, and family care. This graphic shows their sales by geographic region, and it shows that they have the largest presence in North America, followed by Europe. Everywhere else is pretty far behind. The last time that you went to the supermarket, I can almost guarantee that you at least saw something that was made by them, and there's a pretty good chance that you bought something that was made by them. My guess is you took part in that $66 billion and didn't even realize it. Now, I've tried this in a video once before, and I think this is the perfect topic to do it again. I request that you pause the video for a second, go down to the comment section, and write any brands that you associate with Procter & Gamble. Write as many as you can. If you don't know any or haven't heard of them, just say that. I'll admit, before I started learning about them, I couldn't name a single brand. I'm confident in saying that this company is bigger than you realize, and these comments will help demonstrate that. Plus, it'll be interesting to see what everyone knows. Alright, now that you've done that, let's start at the very beginning. Procter & Gamble goes all the way back to 1837. There was a man named William Procter and another man named James Gamble. Procter was a candle maker and Gamble was a soap maker. Since their respective products contained some of the same ingredients, they thought it'd be a smart idea to team up, and that's how it all started. But it wasn't until 1878 when they had their first product breakthrough. It was ivory soap. They invented a way to make this high-quality soap at a low cost. It would even float in water, which was a big part of their marketing campaign. This soap was a huge success, and it's a brand that they still sell today. At this point, I'm going to have to request that you brace yourselves and pay close attention, because unless you named over 30 products in that comment section a minute ago, you're about to learn something. Their next big innovation came in 1911. With Crisco. It's that shortening made of vegetable oil that you use for baking. Well, Procter & Gamble were the people who invented it and sold it for the next 91 years. In 2002, they sold it to Smuckers. The next big innovation was Tide, the laundry detergent. It was one of the first of its kind, invented in 1946 when automatic washing machines were first starting to take off. It quickly became the #1 detergent, and they still make it today. All three of these brands involved a product that was scientifically created in the lab by Procter & Gamble. Now, there's so many brands to touch on here that were either started or bought by the company. Keeping with the soap brands, within the next few years, they started Joy, Cheer, and Zest, all of which they still produce. And not to be confused with Zest, Crest brand toothpaste. That was also started by them and also still sold by them today. So if you've seen anything with the Crest name on it, it was made by Procter & Gamble. Also, in that same year as Crest and Zest, they went a whole new direction by acquiring a company called W.T. Young Foods, which you probably wouldn't know today, but the acquisition involved a peanut butter that would later be transformed into Jif. Now, they sold this one off in 2002, but before that, if you bought Jif, you bought it from them. And that's both chunky and smooth, if that was unclear. 1 year later, they bought another company you wouldn't know, but they owned a brand called Duncan Hines. So from 1956 through 1998, all of those cake mixes and everything else with the Duncan Hines name on it was made by them. 1 year later, another acquisition, Charmin Paper Company, who not only made Charmin toilet paper, but Bounty paper towels as well, both of which are still made by Procter & Gamble today. In that same year, Clorox Chemical Company, the people who make the bleach, they were bought, but 10 years later the Supreme Court forced Procter & Gamble to sell them. It had to do with antitrust laws, monopolies essentially, and with all of this, you could see where they were coming from. But in 1958, Mr. Clean, all of those cleaning products with that bald guy wearing the earring, still made by Procter & Gamble. Can I just review for a second? Within 10 years, they either started or acquired the brands Joy, Cheer, Zest, Crest, Jif, Duncan Hines, Charmin, Bounty, Clorox, and Mr. Clean. Are you convinced that they're big yet? And all of this was pre-1960. In 1960, they started the brand Puffs, who makes Kleenex tissues. That's a different brand. The next year, they started Head & Shoulders Dandruff Shampoo. It's that blue shampoo in the blue bottle. Both of those brands are still made by Procter & Gamble, by the way. In that same year, they started Pampers. They had invented this 3-layer design for disposable diapers that's since kind of become the standard for diapers. Pampers are still made by them today. In 1963, they bought Folgers and didn't sell it until 2008. Let me go really fast for a second. 1966, Scope, the mouthwash. 1973, Dawn, the dish soap. 1976, Loves, the other cheaper diapers. All brands started by Procter & Gamble and all still owned by them today. Let me slow down again because this one is one of my favorites. Pringles, the delicious potato chips sold in a can or tube or whatever it's called. It was invented by Procter & Gamble in 1978. So I'd like to personally thank them for that, but since 2012 they've been made by a different company. Up until this point, almost everything I've mentioned is closely related to either soap or food. Well, in 1982 they took a turn when they acquired a company called Norwich Eaton Pharmaceuticals, which included the brands Pepto-Bismol and Chloraseptic. As of the year 2000, they no longer make Chloraseptic, but they do still make Pepto-Bismol. 1 year later, in 1983, they started the brand Always. 2 years after that, they bought the brand Pantene. They have all sorts of hair care products. In that same year as Pantene, there was also Metamucil and Richardson Vicks Company. That was a big year for them. That deal included all of these cold medicines, anything with the Vicks name on it, NyQuil and ZZZZ-Quil, as well as Olay, the skincare company, and Clarisil, another skincare brand. Clarisil left the company in the year 2000, but everything else I just mentioned is still made by them today. In 1988, they bought a company called Noxel Corporation. They were the owners of the brands Noxzema and CoverGirl. They've both since left the company, Noxzema in 2008 and CoverGirl in 2016. In 1989, they bought the makers of Sunny Delight, or Sunny D, or however you choose to say it. They owned it up until 2004, and this brings us into the 90s, and I still have 15 brands to mention. In 1990, Old Spice. They bought it and still own it today. The next year, Max Factor. They bought it from Revlon and sold it in 2016 as part of that deal that involved CoverGirl and a bunch of other makeup brands. In 1997, Tam Brands, who are the makers of Tampax. They bought it and still own it today. 1999 was a big year for them. Now we're getting into pet food with Iams. They bought it but have since sold it to Mars Incorporated. That same year, they bought another company called Recovery Engineering, who made the pure water filters. They've since sold that as well. And still, in 1999, they started the brands of Febreze, and Swiffer, and they still own both of those today. In 2001, they bought Dr. John's Spin Brush, sold it a few years later. In 2003, they bought the brand Prilosec OTC, the over-the-counter heartburn medicine. I went a little bit out of order there because I want to finish with two very strong acquisitions. Here we go. In 2001, it was their biggest acquisition so far when they paid just under $5 billion to buy Clairol. This company was really big in the hair care industry. They were the owners of the brands Herbal Essence, Aussie, and Nice and Easy Hair Dye, as well as a few other brands. Now I said that was their biggest acquisition so far, but in 2005, they beat their record with a much bigger acquisition. They bought Gillette in a $57 billion deal. That deal included the brands, well, Gillette of course, but also Braun, Oral-B, and Duracell batteries. Duracell left the company in 2016, but the rest of the brands are still sold by Procter Gamble today. That's everything I wanted to focus on in this video, but just know that this is by no means a comprehensive list. It's just all the brands that either I saw as being significant to the company or just names that I thought were interesting. Now, I'm pretty sure I've proven my point already, but just to emphasize it, I'm going to name every brand that I mentioned in this video that at one time was owned by Procter & Gamble. Here we go. I'll go fast. Ivory, Crisco, Tide, Joy, Cheer, Crest, Zest, Jif, Duncan Hines, Charmin, Bounty, Clorox, Mr. Clean, Puffs, Head & Shoulders, Folgers, Scope, Dawn, Loves, Pringles, Pepto-Bismol, Chloraseptic, Always, Pantene, Metamucil, Vicks, NyQuil, ZZZ-Quil, Olay, Clarisil, Noxema, CoverGirl, Sunny D, Old Spice, Max Factor, Tampax, Iams, Pure, Swiffer, Febreze, Spin Brush, Clairol, Herbal Essence, Nice and Easy, Aussie, Prilosec OTC, Gillette, Braun, Oral-B, and Duracell. And you're not going to believe this, but they currently own a few others that I neglected to mention. Notably, there's Bounce, Downy, Dreft, Gain, Era, Cascade, Align, Clear Blue, Fixodent. That's a denture adhesive. I have to end this video. Let me know in the comments. Did I name some things that you weren't aware of? Also, this entire video was dedicated to expressing the size of Procter & Gamble, but there's much more to talk about. Let me know if you'd like to hear more about them in the future. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.